This is What Do You Bring to the Table, a nonprofit project made by youth for youth that aims to explore the many career paths available within our Canadian food systems. By interviewing industry leaders across the country, we get a first-hand look at the various existing and emerging agri-food career opportunities, with a particular focus on equity and sustainability. We want to thank the Catherine Maxwell Meighen Foundation, the Peterborough K.M. Charitable Foundation, and the R. Howard Webster Foundation. Please visit our website www.youthandfoodsystems.ca and sign up for our free monthly e-newsletter to stay involved. You can also find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Links to those are on our website. If you like what we are doing, please drop a like, review, or comment, or consider donating to help us continue our youth-driven work. Thanks for listening!
This is episode 3. Abdelrahman Mohammed interviews Julie Maxwell.
Can you start by describing your current role and what's your main responsibility?
Sure, yeah. So I run a farm called Crocus Hill Garden. It's a small-scale CSA vegetable farm. It's in West Central Saskatchewan. And if you're not familiar with CSA, it stands for Community Shared Agriculture. And it's a style of direct marketing where my customers, they prepay in advance for a share of the harvest. And then once harvest begins, I do weekly or bi-weekly pickups of veggies. So it's kind of like a vegetable subscription program, but a little more, I don't like to call it subscription because it's a little bit, I have more of a relationship, I guess, with my customers than just like handing them veggies and waving them goodbye. I do newsletters every week. I chat with people every week, and hopefully it's a way to get people interested and invested in my farm too. So yeah, that's what I do. Because it's a small business, I kind of do everything. I plant, I make crop plants in the winter. I plant, harvest, all of that stuff. Sometimes I have summer employees, so I manage employees or volunteers, and I do all the marketing and the bookkeeping and everything else. Do you have any questions?
How did your journey look like when you started in this field to where you are now?
Yeah, so I grew up on a grain farm, and I should have said that my farm business is actually located adjacent to my parents' grain farm, which is about 2 hours away from Saskatoon. So I grew up there in a pretty rural area and wasn't interested in farming at all. My dad's a grain farmer, and like most of the farmers around me are grain farmers, and I just didn't see myself doing that work because all the farmers around me were like old men and I didn't see a place for myself there. I wasn't that interested in mechanics, which is a lot of what that grain farming is. It's a lot of just driving machinery around and fixing machinery. So I couldn't wait to leave the farm when I was young. I left actually in grade 12. My parents let me leave early to go to do my last year of high school in Saskatoon in the city. And I kind of found my way back to farming after leaving the farm. I started learning more about like environmentalism and the greater world around me, and I always loved plants and nature. And then slowly I started gravitating more towards growing vegetables. So I got a job at a hydroponic greenhouse that was outside of Saskatoon, and I worked there for a few years. I ended up actually moving to Ontario to do my undergrad and university. So I went to Guelph and I studied international development, not agriculture. But we talked a lot about the food system and the environment, and so that really got me interested in food from more of like a social science perspective. And while I was out in Ontario, I also worked on a bunch of different market gardens and other CSA farms during the summer. I just kind of slowly found my way back into farm stuff, but a different kind of farming. And then when I was done school at Guelph, I decided to move back to the family farm and try to start my own business.
So you mentioned environmentalism. Is that what initially sparked your interest in this field?
Yeah, I would say so. As a young person, I was very environmentally conscious and socially conscious. I was like really worried about climate change, still am. So I was always thinking like, okay, what can I do that's like gonna leave a positive impact on this world? And farming seemed like the best option for me. Just because I come from a farming family, I have access to farming, and yeah, I love being outside and growing food. I love doing the work, and yeah, it just felt like a way that I could positively contribute. So that's kind of what led me to it.
Is there like a specific person or experience that inspired you to pursue this career?
I don't think there is a specific person. I feel like I was thinking about this, and I feel like all the signs and all the people were pointing me back to farming in a way. I had so many like mentors. I worked for so many different farms and like even at the greenhouse, and just had amazing farmer mentors that got me excited about the work. And yeah, like I said, I came to it more from like a social conscience angle. Like I wanted to do this work because I felt like it would be like good for the world. Yeah, so I felt like there's no other job I really wanted to do once I realized I wanted to do farming.
Is there any projects or experiences within the field that you feel truly passionate about?
Yeah, so many. I would say that growing food is always just so fulfilling and so exciting. It's so cool to be able to like try new crops and eat the things you grow and share the things you grow with your community. I love everything about it, but I love how like creative you can be, and like how every farm is different and it's all kind of a puzzle, and you have to figure out like what works in your context, like in your environment, in your market, with your customers. So you're always kind of thinking about all these different angles, and yeah, doing a million things, learning about like ecology and soil health and marketing and accounting and all these different things. So yeah, I'm always trying different stuff and learning different stuff. And most recently, I've been very excited about composting and learning how to make my own compost to feed my own soil on my farm.
Do you have a favorite crop to grow?
Yes, I do. Well, maybe I would choose two. Squash, like winter squash, like pumpkins and butternut and buttercup and all of those. I love growing squash because they're just so like substantial when it comes time to harvest. And we usually harvest them in teams. So one person will go into the field and start throwing them to the other person. So they're really fun to harvest. And I love that they just come in their own packaging too. They're so easy to store and you don't have to waste a plastic bag or anything on them. And they're delicious. So squash, and I also love growing garlic for, I don't know, similar reasons. It's fun to grow and it also comes in its own packaging.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Do you have any specific goals or accomplishments you hope to achieve like in the coming years?
Yeah, so my number one goal with my farm now is to create good jobs in my community. There aren't a lot of good jobs for young people where I'm from. It's pretty rural, and yeah, that's something I care about a lot just because I had such positive experiences as a young person working on farms, and it helped me learn and grow and gain confidence in such a big way, and I'd really like to offer that to young people in my community too.
Great. What are some challenges you've encountered in the job? Like, and how have you worked through them?
Yeah, so the biggest one for me, like I was saying, when I was young, I couldn't wait to leave and go to the city. And I've always been like a little bit of a misfit in my hometown. So for me, it's the rural isolation. I just don't have a lot of community out on the farm where I'm from. I get along well with my parents. It's really just my parents and our dog out there. The dog's like my best friend. So the rural isolation is tough, but I have different ways of handling it. Like I'm able to spend the winters in the city in Saskatoon, but I also got involved in a group called the National Farmers Union, which is an organization that's made up of farmers from across Canada, and we work on promoting like agricultural policy that's better for farmers. And yeah, I work a lot with them, so I'm able to connect a lot with different farmers across Canada via Zoom and phone calls and stuff like that. So that keeps me, that helps with the loneliness a little bit.
Would you ever want to work another job?
Honestly, not really. Like I think about that all the time. Like, what would I do if I wasn't farming? And I can never think of what I'd want to do. I've worked desk jobs before, and it's not for me. It's so hard for me to sit down at a desk all day. And I love how with farming you get to do a little bit of both. Like I can work on my website a little bit, but then I can go out into the field and be outside and doing a job, and it's like so much more diverse. So yeah, not really. I've worked a lot of like entry-level jobs like cashier and things like that, and my favorite one other than farming was working as a dishwasher. But I don't think I'd go back to that.
Like, how do you think the state of the profession itself of farming is like nowadays?
I would say that it's very tough out there. A lot of farmers are struggling, are in debt, are struggling with their mental health. It's hard to turn a profit as a farmer. Like the profit margins are very small, and it's why a lot of farms are trying to scale up and up and up so they can, take those little profit margins and have something to show for it. Yeah, it's tough out there. There's a lot of young people that want to farm that are struggling to access land or access capital enough to get into it. So that's another reason why I work so much with the National Farmers Union, trying to make things better for farmers, make farming more viable and more possible for more people. I think it's a lot easier for me as someone that was born and raised on a farm than it would be for someone who's not to get into it. I have hope because so many people are so passionate about farming and are going to keep fighting to be able to farm. So I have hope for it, but definitely there's a lot of struggles out there.
How do you think the field could improve in the future?
Yeah, there's lots of different ways. The number one thing I always think about is farmland and making farmland accessible for anyone who wants to farm it, because right now it's not. Right now the cost of land has been growing year after year after year for decades. And we're at a point now where the cost of land is higher than the value that you could accrue from it from farming. So it doesn't, it's kind of a market failure. And it means that people can't access farming unless they have intergenerational wealth, or they grew up on a farm, or they have huge loans and huge debt, or a partner that's subsidizing the farm, something like that. But just farming on its own, it's impossible to do right now. So I think we need to be pushing for policies to make farmland more accessible and to kind of rein in the price of farmland, or think of creative solutions for making farmland accessible, like there's programs called farm incubators, which is like a space, like if you think of, like an incubator is where you like raise a baby chick from an egg. So it's the same thing, but for farmers. So it's a space where they could go and have access to land and tools and everything they need to get started for a few years while they're building their business, until they have enough money to get their own land or start their own business somewhere else. So yeah, any programs or policies that help make land more accessible is a great place to start.
Yeah, I agree. It's like agriculture is definitely one of the most important things in every society. Maybe like the most important thing. I mean, yeah.
We all gotta eat.
Yeah, like what advice would you give to today's youth interested in pursuing this field?
Yeah, so like I said, like to me it's the most fulfilling, best job in the world, but it is very difficult. You won't get rich probably from farming, but you'll live a very rich life. You'll get to be outside in nature, working with your body, growing good food, hopefully interacting with the community and like being a positive force in your community. So it's very fulfilling. It's hard to get into, it's hard to get started. Like the barriers to entry are very high for farmers. So I would recommend getting involved with groups that advocate for farmers and offer a community like the National Farmers Union, like I talked about. There's another one called Young Agrarians out here that are doing a lot of work to help farmers get started and get on the land. Yeah, I don't know if I have other advice.
Are there ways you think young people could get more involved or gain experience like early on? What things can they do?
Yeah, I think it depends on your community and what's going on. If you have opportunities to volunteer on farms or market gardens or community gardens, like definitely do that. Get your hands dirty. Start a garden if you can, or even experiment with growing indoor crops like microgreens. When I was in university at Guelph, I started like a tiny little business where I grew microgreens. I had like one shelving unit and some grow lights, and I grew pea shoots and sunflower shoots in my bedroom in my student house. And I had like 10 people, I think, subscribed. So I would grow every week. I would go and deliver them to my neighbors or whatever, because you can grow them in 2 weeks. So those are super fun. Like there's lots of stuff you can do inside to experiment. And there's also lots of great books and like YouTube videos and podcasts about vegetable farming. I really love the one called No-Till Growers. They have a podcast series where they interview all kinds of different farmers, and now they have one that's about composting, and they have one that's about seed production. So you get to listen to all these different interviews of all these different growers from around the world, and you learn so much from that. Yeah, so that's some advice.
You mentioned the interviewers. Do you have any more like recommendations for people who are more interested to get into the field?
Yeah, like podcast recommendations or YouTube videos, things like. Yeah, so No-Till Growers is my favorite one. There's the NFU, National Farmers Union, also has a podcast called Sow and Grow, which is more about agricultural policy and the agricultural like landscape of the food system. So less technical, more like social. And books, let me think. There's a bunch, but I can't think of the titles. I might have to get back to you on my favorite book.
Yeah, it's fine. looking back, is there anything you wish you had done, you had known before starting in this career?
Yeah, so I wish I had considered the financial side of it more. I was really lucky to, grow up in like a middle class family, and I didn't have to think about money too much when I was growing up. And my parents always kind of told me like, do what you love. And I wish that I had considered the business side of it more, because I maybe would have made some different choices and set myself up for success earlier. I think if I could go back in time, I would have studied a trade like mechanics or like welding or something like that, because those jobs are always in high demand and they're also very useful in farming. But it's like a job you can, do in the off season or use to supplement your income. So any job really that you might be able to do in the off season or use to supplement your income is useful. But also, when you're making your farm plan, to really make sure that everything you're doing is going to make money and not lose you money, because it's very easy to lose money when you're farming. And you have to be your own boss, so it's like a lot to manage sometimes.
What's one thing you find difficult or unappealing about your job?
Well, I already touched on the rural isolation. But the other thing is what I touched on, like being your own boss is really great some days. Like you get to make your own schedule, you get to call the shots. But there are also a lot of days where I'm just like, I wish someone would tell me what to do, because I don't know what to do right now. So I think that's something that you just kind of grow into. You live and learn and figure out how to do things. But that's probably one. Sometimes being my own boss and being the one that's responsible for everything at the end of the day is a blessing and a curse.
Would you want to expand your team in the future?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, the goal is to try to create jobs. And actually my partner, my boyfriend is interested in farming. So next year he's going to take a 6-month sabbatical to come and farm with me. So maybe I'll have a co-manager.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, to conclude, you seem like a great person. You're trying to help the field, and you have what looks to be a thriving business. And I was really happy to interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of What Do You Bring to the Table, a project of Seeds of Diversity's Youth and Food Systems program. Thanks again to the Catherine Maxwell Meighen Foundation, the Peterborough K.M. Charitable Foundation, and the R. Howard Webster Foundation. And of course, thanks to you for listening. See you again soon.